Hey guys, this is actually going to be a serious video for once. My first serious video on my channel, but you know what? I felt like this particular incident was worth a serious video. So, I live in Northeast Georgia, Raven County. Beautiful place. Place I just got a few months ago, covered in trees. I'm literally in a forest. There's a waterfall in the backyard. Like, this place is like a botanical garden, and I feel so blessed to live here. But I found that there's so much dead foliage that falls because there's so many trees that I had to have a way to get rid of it. And because there's a lot of hemlocks and things growing, that if I were to actually try to burn this stuff, it'd set the whole damn place on fire. So I thought, I can't keep just piling this stuff up. And, there's a lot of trimming and things I want to do to clear this place up a little bit. So I thought the only way I know to do this, other than hauling it off to a landfill and paying for it and all that business, and just not going to do that, is to get a wood chipper. I love doing stuff outside, so it's worth it. Um, did research for about 2 weeks on economically the price and the quality of what to get. And it took me a while to figure it out. I searched Amazon, I searched like local businesses, um, just other Google searches for different places. Come across one from Harbor Freight. Harbor Freight is like a tool company, and there's actually a location I went to in Seneca, South Carolina. Great people. The cashier really helped me out. She was awesome. This was just a couple days ago, so check the date on this video, but a few days short of June 2020. Bad toilet paper virus. But, so I got this thing from Harbor Freight. After a coupon, I got a year's full replacement warranty. Doesn't matter what happens to this thing. The girl told me, she was like, use the hell out of it because no matter what happens, it's replaced, plus $20 off of that. So after tax and all, I ended up paying around $500 for this thing. All right. So let me show you this thing. I'm gonna try to be as, you know, uh, instructional as I can, because I really want to give this thing credit for what it's worth, but also give you guys an insight on what you need to like kind of be aware of before you get it. All right. So here it is. This is assembled. Now, when I purchased it, it came in a box, had the logo and all this stuff on it, looked really nice. All you really got to do, now I didn't really give an instructional video on how to take it out of the box, because honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, if you can't figure out how to take this damn thing out of the box, then you're SOL. But all I had to do is cut the straps, and the box top literally lifted right up, and this thing actually has like a wooden crate that it comes in protected. Thing came very well packaged. So this thing only came in a few parts. I was drinking some beer and listening to some tunes while I'm putting this thing together, and even doing all that and taking my time, it only took maybe a half hour. So this thing pretty well comes assembled. Only thing that you have to put together is you've got this bar back here, and basically all this bar is a pull bar, so when you're toting it around, you got something to hold on to. It's literally just a couple bolts on either side, and I'll be honest with you guys, I think it was maybe a 10 millimeter. I can't honestly remember, but if you got a socket set, you can figure it out. It's around 10 millimeter. You assemble that. This thing has like sort of like a brace bar here in the front that keeps it steady and keeps the motor up off the ground. Same thing here. It's going to be the same socket. This thing was a little difficult to put on. Not really, but if you're going to do it by yourself, what I advise is actually tipping this thing over, taking the top there and tipping it back, because it has about 5 washers you have to put on to secure this thing. It's not difficult, but it's just a little. Uh, you gotta have some good hands to be able to do it. Um, you have to put that on. You gotta put the tires on. Super simple. All you have to do is just slide these things on the axle, and then there's a washer you put over the end, and then just a cotter pin, and that's it. And literally, that was the entire installation on this thing. Okay, so now make sure you got the fuel in it, otherwise it ain't gonna crank. Alright, so sure enough, looking at this thing, it's pretty simple. There's your air filter, don't have to do nothing with that out of the box. All you gotta do is get you some 10W30 oil. Don't quote me on this because I did not look at the stats, but I'm pretty sure it takes somewhere around 10 ounces of 10W30 oil. It's a 4-cycle motor, so you don't mix it. What I actually did, because I have had such bad experience with these small engines with the 2-cycle motors are even worse, but even with these guys, and even with non-ethanol gas, I just always seem to end up having carburetor problems. So I actually got the True Fuel that you can get at a lot of different places. I got this at Home Depot, and it's just so pure and already has like stabilizers in it. It's expensive. It's like 20 bucks a gallon, but no more than I'm going to use this thing. It's probably worth it to keep from having to take the carburetor apart and all that business, a few months down the road. It takes 0.9 gallons, so if you were to get a gallon of gasoline, you won't use quite all of it, but it's pretty close to a gallon. Now, when you go to add the oil, let's come around it here. This thing is really so cool. Here we go. Alright, so this guy, you just turn it counterclockwise and pull it out, and there's actually a dipstick on the end of it. Like I said, it took pretty close to around 10 ounces. If you don't fill it close to the top of the dipstick, if it's not even registering on the dipstick, or if it's really low, this thing has a cutoff switch to where if it's low in oil, it will not crank. So it's kind of good because it protects your motor, but it could give you some problems because some of these sensors on these things can be a little bit iffy. But that's where the oil's at. There's your spark plug, but you don't have to do anything with that. It's got this cool little handle on it if you do have to like take it on or off. That way you don't really damage the plug wire itself. Alright, here's where you add your gas. 0.9 gallons. This is a really nice gas cap. You can't overfill it. So you've kind of got like a little wire basket down in here. If you get fuel much past this orange strip, it will also potentially give you cranking problems because of combustion issues, safety issues. So just fill it up slow. Alright, so this thing has 2 different chutes on it. It's got the big guy up top, little guy down here. Ironically, the bigger stuff that you're going to chip up is going to go in the little guy down there, smaller stuff up here. So this is really going to be my first issue with this thing. You've got this big mouth on it, which most of these chippers do, and a lot of the chippers may be the same way until you get to the commercial grade ones. But you would think by looking at this thing that you could just dump this thing full of like leaves and limbs and it would just suck it down in there and get rid of it. That is not going to be the case. So you get down here, you've got this rubberized stuff that's honestly kind of agitating, but I do see the purpose because this thing can potentially sling up some wood chips, and if you're not wearing goggles or something like that, it could put your eye out. But you got this big mouth, but this is all you've got for the chute. So this thing is like a pretty big opening with just a small little hole down here. So what I have found, what happens is if you try to say just take even like a small couple hand loads of leaves and dump it in there, they tend to kind of get clogged up in that opening. So what I have found, and I really don't think there's going to be a way around this, is for this top chute, for those kind of things, the small limbs, which this thing says right here, small brush and leaves don't exceed a 1/2 inch in diameter. I found if they are like really soft, almost half dead limbs, it will take much larger than that. I've easily put an inch diameter in there with no problem. But if they're green and pretty hard, 1/2 inch is probably going to be close to your limit, maybe an inch. But you just can't fill it too full, because if you do, you end up having to have a prodding stick to kind of push it through that hole. And it works fine. Like when it finally chips through, everything's good and it works great. But without a prodding stick, I really don't see how you're going to be able to use this top chute unless you're just barely throwing anything in it at a time. And I was pretty patient with it, and I just saw it was going to be inevitable to have a nice sturdy prodding stick. And eventually, if you're like me, you're going to have a couple, because you're going to end up chipping them up down to hardly nothing eventually. But once everything goes through the chute, chops it up so fine. If it's like leaves or small sticks, it almost chops it up into sawdust. Then you've got the big chute here. Instructions say that you can feed up to 3 inches in diameter. I have certainly found this to be the case. However, if it's, say, a super hard piece of wood, it might bog it down. In fact, it probably will bog it down. However, it will still chip it up. And I think I only had this thing after about an hour and a half worth of use. I had it bogged down to where it shut the motor off just one time. But other than that, it does really well. Don't expect it to not bog down with some really big stuff, especially in this big chute. It seemed to bog down bigger, the small chute. The small chute where you're going to feed the bigger branches seemed to bog it down more so than this one, even if this one's passing through a lot of stuff at once. But even if it bogged down, like I said, it only stopped on me once, and that was over an hour and a half worth of use. And once I had to crank it back up, I actually gave it a couple minutes because I was collecting up some other branches, and when I went to crank it back up, cranked right up. Let me jump back to something. So when I went to crank this thing up, what it calls for in the instructions is to put it on a third up from the turtle mode, so your slowest mode when you go to put the throttle in place. Hate to be jumping around like this, but I do want you guys to be familiar with this. Oh, let me come around here. So when you go to crank it, it's so easy. It's got diagrams, but you've basically got your choke. So what you're going to want to do is put it to start. It's got run, and run is to the right, The left is to start. So when you go to crank it, of course, put it to start. You have the fuel cut on and off switch. So for me, like I tote this thing around my property a lot, and I don't really want the fuel to be sloshing around and things like that. No more than I have to. So the fuel on and off is pretty cool to have, and it's simple. To the left, this one kind of clicks back and forth. This one it has a little resistance. All the way to the left is cut off. All the way to the right is cut on. So you've only really got one more step before you have to crank it. This thing isn't like a lot of 2 cycles where it has a primer bulb. This one doesn't have a primer bulb. This is the choke. And then up here is basically your throttle. So this is all the way to turtle. This is full run. Left is full run, right is the slowest it'll go. So when they say to crank it, you put it about 1/3 of the way up. I found that when I went to crank it, it did not want to crank only 1/3 of the way up. What I did is I went just slightly more, maybe about halfway up, and when I did that, cranked right up. The other thing, if you come around to this other side, you've got this little guy right here. This is basically just the electronic on-off switch. And so of course you got to make sure it's turned on. Once you do that, once you add your oil, you've got your gas, you flip these guys in place, you're ready to crank it up. This thing really does a great job chipping things up really fine. And so when you do chip the bigger stuff that's like 1 inch or more in diameter, it's going to give you some prime mulch. It has some really big tires on it, so when you're having to tote it around, it'll go over some really good terrain. It's so compact. I don't know if you can tell, but it's probably about, if I had to guess, around 30 inches off the ground. Really compact. I'm about 6 foot tall, so when I use the pull bar and tote it around, the pull bar is almost a little too low, so I have to hunch over a little bit to be able to pull it around, good, but it pulls around really well. It's a little front heavy because of the way the motor sits, but it has the capability to put a tow bar on it to pull it around on a mower or something, but for me, I'm able to pull it around okay. The rubber pieces here that are kind of like a protection thing, they serve their purpose, like I said, but don't doubt that when you're having to force that stuff through with like a prodding stick, that it's going to kind of get in your way, and you're almost going to have to do some unsafe stuff to get it to go through. But overall, like out of 5 stars, if I had to give this thing an overall rating, so far, I've only used it once, but between the experience at Harbor Freight, the way it was packaged, the ease of putting it together, the ease of using it, the ergonomics of it, it's the perfect height to feed stuff through, unless you're either a midget or you're 7 foot tall. And so it's really cool. I would probably have to give it a minimum of 4 stars, up to 4.5 stars. My only complaint, like I said, is feeding stuff through the big chute. If the opening was a little bit larger, I feel like you'd have better luck with the bigger chute. One more thing, and I've not had to do this yet, but I did read in the manual that occasionally, and I think it's because of the chute issue and the tendency of it getting jammed without a prodding stick, is you've got this back panel back here that just 3 bolts come out. It's the same size as the rest of that business, and basically what you have to do is pull that little round panel off and clean out some debris. Haven't had to do it yet, but I kind of have this feeling I might have to. at some point. But simple fix. Um, so overall, like I said, I would have to say probably 4.5 out of 5 stars on this thing, easily. And I'll try to do an update as I'm able to use it more. But uh, cool little guy, Predator, 212cc chipper shredder, and it's kind of a specialty at the Harbor Freight. You can get this particular chipper shredder on Amazon. I love Amazon because it's so dang convenient. They usually have some of the best prices, and they have damn near anything. However, this same chipper shredder on Amazon, I know is at least a minimum of $100 more than it is through Harbor Freight. So if you either have a local Harbor Freight or if you don't, you would still be better off buying this thing through their online website and having it shipped to you. If I'm not mistaken, they might do free shipping on these things too. If you have a local Harbor Freight, it's a cool place, man. Tools galore. But anyway, that's kind of my review on this. Carl just said to make sure it's got fuel in it, otherwise it won't crank. And stay tuned because me and Sweetie Betty, we're going to end up eating some pork chops after a day of chipping and shredding. Follow my site. I do lots of Carl Childers from Sling Blade. And my impressions are okay, but my situations are pretty dang funny. Love the support, guys. Have a good one.